It's been a turbulent 12 months, perhaps not as turbulent as the 49 days before Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, when it was Liz Truss at the helm. Let's look back at the last year and potentially what could come in the year ahead. Joining me in the studio is political commentator David Kogan and former Conservative advisor Charlie Rowley. David, let's start with you. Look, we sort of enjoyed charting the last 12 months and really the glee there at lots of those by-elections, which have been calamitous for the Conservative Party. But Rishi Sunak inherited an extremely turbulent situation. Let's give credit where we can. What's he done well?
Well, I think the best thing he did, and he did it really well, was to get rid of Liz Truss. After that, I think what's interesting about the year that you've just shown and the year that he's been in power is essentially he has failed pretty much on everything he's tried to do. And what's curious about him is that a lot of people, when he came in, thought he was going to be the sort of technocratic, middle-of-the-road Conservative who is going to draw the Conservatives back from the insanity of the Liz Truss 49 days. And actually, you know, most of us were prepared to give him some, even across the political divide, some credit for trying to do that. But I think what we've seen since actually that by-election in Uxbridge that you had a clip of there is that he then decided, and his advisors decided, that you had to reveal the real Rishi. And the real Rishi isn't a technocratic Conservative. The real Rishi is a man who appointed a series of disastrous cabinet ministers, including the current Home Secretary. He has essentially, as his major policy issues, decided to get rid of A-levels, which won't happen in his next year anyway. He's decided to get rid of HS2, which doesn't win any votes. And he's decided to do something about smoking, which might win some votes. There is no strategy. There is no policy. And the one thing I think that your package didn't reflect was throughout the whole year, the cost of living is going up, mortgage rates have gone up, inflation remains high. And the one thing that Labour can depend on in the next 12 months is you get the old adage in politics, governments lose elections, opposition don't win them. Well, here, actually, the biggest asset that Labour might have in terms of everything else is this government shows no signs in the course of this winter, with the NHS crisis and the economy getting worse, that Rishi Sunak's got any answers at all.
Right, Charlie, you very politely listened to that. I'm sure you disagree.
Well, I think David should come off the fence and say what he really thinks. I think, that was quite an assessment. But, of course, I would politely disagree, as always, because I think, as you rightly said, Rosie, after the 49 days of Liz Truss, which I think David was right to say that, it wasn't the best of her, so right to...
It was very politely put, Charlie.
Right to move out and move on. But look, what Rishi has done is he's brought that economic stability again. The markets were shored up when they were, doing all kinds of somersaults after the mini-budget of last year. He's brought that political stability to our institutions. Politics, I know, sort of, seems quite geeky to most people across the country, but for every sector, politics matters. And if you have for example, a Boris Johnson government where you had ministers didn't know whether they were coming or going, you didn't have quite the organisation in number 10. If you had, obviously, what you then had under Liz, complete turmoil, the idea that you've got someone in number 10 now that has just brought stability to politics, to the economy, I think in itself, in a year, is no small achievement.
Do you think it's stability maybe, because it was so terrible before? If we go before Liz Truss, we have Boris Johnson. Do you think Rishi Sunak, Charlie's really been able to shake off the allegations of sleaze that were kind of really dogging the party before then?
No, is the answer, because what Rishi has to do is present himself as Rishi Sunak, as the Prime Minister. It's his platform, it's his policy agenda. The Conservative Party as a whole is still facing huge problems, and I think that's why, when we see in all of those 8 by-elections, I think it was, that you mentioned, starting with Mid-Bedfordshire and looking at all the others, there have been Tory MPs that have fallen way below the standard that's expected. There has been sleaze, there's been scandal. Those MPs have gone. I think that has played a part in the electorate when they've come to vote in those by-elections. And bearing in mind, in those by-elections, turnout has been incredibly low. So I think it's almost impossible to draw any sort of firm, concrete conclusions from that, particularly when you still have pollsters that, when asked the question, if you're going to vote for Rishi Sunak or Sir Keir Starmer, who would you prefer to be the Prime Minister? Well, I think it's still 50-50.
Let's talk about firm, concrete conclusions. David, if I'm voting for the Labour Party, do I know with certainty what Keir Starmer actually stands for? Am I voting for a party that just isn't Conservative because I'm fed up with them? Or do I have clear, firm ideas about what their policies are?
Well, I think increasingly you're going to see over the course of the next year those policies being expanded. In fact, after I leave here tonight, I'm going to an event with Rachel Reeves, where she's starting to talk more and more, as she did at conference, about her economic priorities. And I think you're going to start seeing much more flesh.
So what are they? What are they then?
Well, you know, clearly what Labour is going to be playing are the cards of economic stability. I mean, I think Charlie, whenever I'm on with Charlie, he does a fantastic job of rewriting the history of the modern Conservative Party. And the idea that Rishi Sunak has been presiding over a period of economic stability is frankly just laughable.
Well, inflation is coming down. The economy is
growing.
inflation
is something. Have you seen what's happened on the FTSE 250 today? It's dropped by 14 points or 12 points. There is not economic stability, and it's only going to get worse. Now, actually, to be fair to Rishi Sunak, not all of that is his fault. And to be fair to him, he had the opportunity with Jeremy Hunt to do some stuff. And, you know, there is a degree of stability after the madness of the Truss 49 days. But to come back to Rosie's question about Labour, where Rachel Reeves, who is way ahead of the polls than Jeremy Hunt, I mean 20, 30 points ahead as the person people expect to be the next Chancellor of the Exchequer, her speech at conference was laying out that they are now looking at a growth strategy. They are looking at actually fix very considerable economic controls within government, something that is not Labour's traditional position, actually. In fact, in some strange way, you now have a Conservative Party responsible for the highest rates of tax in this country's history, and certainly the increases in tax in this country's history, and Labour actually, weirdly, being like the old Conservative Party and actually sticking to economic stability and growth. And I think what you're going to see when the Labour government comes in is that actually there are very clear strategies on things like the NHS and on education and on transport policy, but they're all going to be bound by economic stability and the idea that you have to get back to growth. And part of that is going to be Labour putting out its taxation policies a year from now, if that's when the election is, which I think are going to be remarkably stable and sensible.
I think the public do want a bit of clarity, and they want to know those clear dividing lines between the parties, because it might just be that you then vote for Keir Starmer, who's going to try and execute exactly the same things that the Conservatives have done. There are very few very clear points of difference. Charlie, today in Prime Minister's questions, look, Keir Starmer was saying to Rishi, give the public what they want at a general election. You know, he's got a year, a bit more than that if he wants to do so. From your perspective, this is your party. Is that enough time to engineer significant change that we, the voters, can say, OK, I can actually, rather than feel like I'm in this sort of PR bluff, OK, the Conservatives promised that, they've done it?
Well, I think there is time to present that narrative. They've got to get on with it because, I mean, we had a little joke at the start about, you know, the Prime Minister's 5 priorities because we've heard it so many times. We all know what they are. It goes back to your question, you know, we don't know what Labour's policies are. They haven't revealed them yet. Now, that might be good politics. That might be good political tactics.
If we're going to sort of say bingo of those 5 pledges in a year's time, which could the Conservatives, with credibility, say, we've actually managed that?
Well, what I do think is that they'll be able to do quite a lot of them, actually. But the question is, because I think inflation will come down. I think it will be halved by the end of the year. I think it will come down further. I think you will be able to point to statistics that say that they've grown the economy. You know, the Prime Minister will tell you now that the small boat crossings have stopped. They've come down by a fifth compared to this year in comparison to last.
Maybe they certainly haven't stopped, have they?
But the problem is, so I think that you could point to all of those things and say, actually, yes, we have achieved, but will the public feel it? That's the key question, I think. So it's the pound in the pocket to people where you can say to people until you're blue in the face, the inflation has come down, that's helped you with your cost of living. If people don't feel it, then that's where I think we have a problem.
I agree. I mean, listen, I think he has, I think of all of the 5 pledges, what everybody's expecting is inflation will start to come down by the end of the year. Of the other 4, he's nowhere near his targets. But actually, I completely agree with you. I think actually there is a year to go, and a year is a hell of a long time in politics, assuming the election's next October, give or take. And I think actually Sunak does have some time, but that time is running out very quickly because, and again, I agree with you, Charlie, will people, A, believe that they are better off under Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister than Keir Starmer? I suspect not. But secondly, we are about to hit the winter, and the winter, you know, with people hitting mortgage rates that aren't dropping, the NHS is going to have an incredibly tough time meeting any of its waiting list targets. And this is going to be blamed on the government of the day. And again, to be fair to Rishi Sunak for a second, it would be blamed on any government of the day. And I think actually history tells us that actually governments run out of time very quickly, and it's not a course of a year. It's going to be actually between now and Jeremy Hunt's next budget, which is 4 months. And
I think the one thing I think the government might have on its side is because there's been so much politics over the last few years that the public are still not quite tuned in as they might be when it comes to a general election. And when there haven't been that many policies so far announced by Labour, again, could be good tactics. They might not need to because of the turmoil that you've seen within the Tory.
Maybe holding still, yeah.
But when those policies do start to come forward, well, you might start to see more scrutiny under the Labour Party, where there might be more division within the Labour Party, I should say. That's when the public might actually think, oh no, it's better the devil you know.
We'll wait and see. And who knows? It could be, January 2025 when we all go to the ballot boxes and mark whoever's managed to persuade us in that time. It could be a year of electioneering and a lot of, proposals, hopefully, for us to sort of tease through here. Thank you both very much. Charlie, David, really appreciate your time.